Good evening. My name is Patrick Leader of Leader Games. This is my game, Vast the Crystal Caverns. I am the developer. David Somerville was the original designer, and I received some additional development from Kyle Wuffel, which I haven't mentioned in any of the previous videos. Sorry, guys. This is the fourth of 5 videos about the roles in the game. And just kind of discussing them so you can learn the rules faster than reading the rules. Though each video is a little bit long, so maybe reading the rules would be faster for you. We are now to the video about the cave, which I think is a fan favorite and a very popular feature of the game. The cave wins by getting all the tiles in the game into play and then collapsing the edges of the map until 5 of these crystals have been removed from the map, the crystal tiles. They don't have to have a token on them, just the tile. And when that happens, the cave collapses, burying everyone inside of it forever. And the cave wins. Kind of a dark game, but there you are. Alright, the cave's turn is probably the most straightforward of all the turns. But let me talk about what happens when the cave is not having its turn. The cave has a couple passive roles in the game. One of them is that the cave will always maintain a hand of 3 tiles. Always maintain a hand of 3 tiles. If you play a tile for any reason, immediately draw another tile. If you have to place 3 tiles, place 1, draw a tile, place 1, draw a tile, place 1 immediately. So you always have a hand of 3 tiles. You also have an event deck, which excuse me, let me re-aim the camera a little bit here. You also have an event deck, which you can always look at the top 3 cards of the event deck if you want to. We used to have people keep them in their hand as a hand of cards. This is the same way to do that, but since events don't come up that often, it's just handier to store them on top of the deck. So you can always look at the top 3 event cards, and you also deal with treasures. So when it's not your turn, and there's a new board edge that's open, so for instance, if this situation occurred, you get to decide which tile will go there. Pick one of your tiles from your hand, place that tile, and immediately draw a new one. As the cave, you can always review what's on the tiles if you want to. This isn't a game of memory. You don't have to memorize where everything is. You can always pick up the tiles and look at it. It might tell your opponent something if you spend too much time looking at the tiles, but you can always do that if you want to. Please don't delay the game that way, though. Rude. Okay, so getting back to the cave then, or not getting back to. Also, excuse me, the knight will control, or the cave will control the events when the knight hits them, and the cave will control the treasure when the knight hits them. So those are the passive things you have to do when it's not your turn. The cave on its turn, I'll say it, collects omens. And you get as many omens as there are either, you can use the token or the meeple. There are treasure troves in play. The rules might refer to them as treasure chests, excuse me if that's right. And there are also, excuse me, crystal tiles, crystal tokens in play. So these crystals will be on unsmashed crystal tiles. Add up those two. So count how many treasures you have and how many crystals you have somewhere in the cave. If the thief is carrying a treasure, that still counts for your purposes until the thief escapes the cave. You then look on this chart down here. So if you have 0 of those things, you get 1 omen. If you have 1 of those things, you get 2 omens. If you have 2 to 3 of those things, you get 3 omens, and so on. And you reach into your bag, and you draw that many omens. The official Vast brand bag. Alright, so the omens then correspond to the powers on your sheet, and I will talk about those a little bit in a minute. You then, by the end of your turn, have to shape the cave. When you shape the cave, you get to place one of your tiles onto the board, and it can now be in a spot that's not legal. So, I mean, legal is kind of a weird word anyway, right? But you can now place a tile where there's no open edge. So, for instance, I could put a tile down by that wall. I could put a tile right here. I could put it here. I could fill in this space, whatever I want to do with that one tile. Also, by the end of your turn, you have to place one treasure. So you have to take one treasure from your supply and put it on a dark tile. The dark tile cannot have any of the other player's pieces or another treasure on it. It has to be an empty tile when you place it. That same goes for if you're playing Pass Plunder. During your turn then, before you get to placing a tile or placing a treasure, you can activate the powers on your sheet. When you activate the powers on your sheet, their cost is listed and how many omens it's going to cost you to play. For instance, Rock Slide, you can't see it because it's tiny. It says 2 omens. You can play then any omen matching these suits. So you could play 2 bats, you could play 2 boulders, or you could play 2 gems, or you could play some combination. So you could play a bat and a boulder. If this happens to be a boulder, if I had drawn a bat also, I could place a Rock Slide. Most of them cost 1. Giant Bats cost 1. Pass Plunder costs 1. Hatred costs 1. And Crystal Curse costs 1. The Rock Slide costs 2 omens, and the Spores cost 3. You do not have to have any particular set. The white symbols there just show you which of the omens you can use to power that power. So if you want to use Spores, with 3, which cost 3 omens, you could use 3 gems, 3 mushrooms, 3 rivers, or any combination thereof. You could use one of each if you wanted to. That's fine. Pass Plunder and Hatred are special because the second time you use it, either of them on a turn. So the first time you use Pass Plunder, it costs 1 omen. Second time you use Pass Plunder, it costs 2 omens. The third time it costs 3 omens, and it'll cost 3 after that. So every use of it after that is 3 omens. Same with Hatred. And those are separate tracks. So if you want to do 2 of each, it'll cost you 1 omen and 2 omens, and 1 omen and 2 omens. You can then, so you can activate these powers anytime you want in your turn after collecting omens. So you can't pass plunder or treasure down onto the table. Don't ask. Giant Bats then, so I'll just talk about the powers real quick. Giant Bats lets you place you can move a treasure, the knight, or a goblin 3 spaces. You cannot move the knight through spaces that it can't move through. So you can't move it through walls, you can't move it through dark tiles. Rock Slide lets you place one of these tokens onto the board. One of these meeples, there's also a token version of it. And you place it between 2 walls, and while it's in play, that now counts as a wall. If the tile later gets spun because of the Crystal Curse, or removed for some reason, you just remove the Rock Slide and put it back on your sheet. If you have all the Rock Slides in play, you may use the Rock Slide power to simply move a Rock Slide if you want to. Pass Plunder allows you to place an additional treasure. Treasures benefit all the other rolls, so you want to be careful about where you place them. Generally, you want to place treasures in the path of the knight, so the knight will explore out the edge of the map, and as the knight flips over tiles, you are allowed to place additional tiles, which helps your goal. By placing additional treasures with Pass Plunder, you are increasing your income on later turns, and so you want to use Pass Plunder to get more omens generated in later turns. Soporific Spores is a little bit long for this video, but basically what it does is it's the way you directly attack the other players. The knight would lose 5 grit, a goblin tribe is reduced to 1 population, the dragon has to move a sloth back, and so on. So that's what Spores does. Hatred allows you to place an additional tile, and Crystal Curse allows you to rotate a tile, or you can reset an event by putting an event token back onto an event on the board. So, for instance, if this was empty, I could place that event back on there. Or it allows you to take the 3 event cards on top of the deck and bury them at the bottom of the deck. The Crystal Curse lets you rotate a tile, which lets you do what I call the stupid cave trick. So for instance, if I rotated this tile, I now have a new open edge here. Well, that lets me place a tile. And that's a way that Crystal Curse can be used to place tiles very quickly. You want to save those for late in the game when you can suddenly surprise your opponents with a lot of tile placements and empty out the tile stack. 2 things that I want to talk about then. If you have a curse if you have a crystal in your hand, or if you have a vault, which you're only in play when the thief is in play, in your hand, and it is your turn, you are obliged to place them the next time you have to place a tile. So if you're placing a tile for the one tile you place per turn, or you activate Hatred, or you turn a tile with Crystal Curse so that you have to place a new tile, a crystal or a vault, which is this one, have to be placed next. And then, of course, you draw another tile. That's what I'll talk about. If you get all the tiles exhausted on your turn, you cannot place any more tiles or remove any tiles on your turn. If another player forces you to place your last tile, that's great. You take this card, which is called The Cave Grows, and you flip it over to The Cave is Collapsing. On later turns, so if the other players do it for you on your next turn, or if you empty out the stack yourself, then you have to wait till your next turn. You remove 3 tiles a turn when it comes to Shape the Cave instead of placing a tile. And then every use of Hatred from then on allows you to remove an extra tile. When you're removing tiles from the board, you have to remove any tile that's touching the board on one edge, and then you have to remove tiles that are touching on 2 edges before you can remove tiles that are touching on 3. So in fact, you never will remove a tile that's touching 3 because there will always be a piece in the corner. As you remove tiles, you flip them over to show what they are. If it's a crystal, you keep it to show that you are 1 step towards winning. Otherwise, you can just throw the rest of the tiles back in the box or whatever you want to do with them. And that's how collapsing works. When you've removed 5 of these crystal tiles, the cave comes down and you win the game. And that is collapsing. So then, as you're playing the game, you want to try and accumulate. Unfortunately, the crystals are distributed throughout the pile. Excuse me, I'm going really out of focus here. What's going on? Unfortunately, the crystals are distributed throughout the stack, so it's hard to do. But you kind of want to get them all on one edge if you can, so then you can just remove that edge in 1 turn or 2 turns and quickly end the end game. And that is collapsing. I think that's about it. There's some rules clarifying what happens if tiles are removed from the board through the Dragon's Wrath power, or the Goblin's Cave-in Secret. What happens with those tiles when they're removed before the collapse and after the collapse. If another player collapses a crystal tile, it counts for your victory condition. If they remove tiles before the collapse has started, the tiles just go back to the bottom of the stack unless they were crystals. Otherwise, after the collapse has started, if they collapse tiles, they're just helping you. If a tile with a player on it gets collapsed, I would refer to the rules for what happens then, but basically that character gets a free move to get back onto the board. Alright, thank you. That's the end of the Caves video.